All right, good evening. My name is Jennifer Lee and I work for the City of Burlingame, and I will be moderating tonight's program. And along with our co-sponsor Bosca, I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's class. So before we begin tonight's program, I'm going to go over some housekeeping. First, all attendees are muted by default. Secondly, the instructor will be pausing periodically for questions, and we encourage you to ask any questions you have. If you would like to ask a question, you can do so in two ways. The first option is to use the raise hand feature, which I will then call on you and you can unmute to ask your question. And the second option is to use the Q&A function in Zoom. I'll go ahead and read your question to the instructor and we can respond that way. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on Bosca's website afterwards. So first, I'd like to share a brief background on Bosca. Bosca is a special district that represents the interests of 26 cities, water districts, and private water companies, all of which purchase water from the San Francisco Regional Water System. Bosca member agencies collectively serve over 1.8 million residents and 40,000 businesses in Alameda, Santa Clara, and San Mateo counties. And their goal is to ensure a high quality supply of water at a fair price for the member agencies and their customers. And consistent with that goal, Bosca provides a regional water conservation program to support agencies in improving water use efficiency. Outdoor water provides the single biggest potential source of untapped water savings. We're reducing outdoor water use through water efficient plants, and innovative techniques can help conserve water to ensure that the future water supply needs of our communities are met. And Bosca provides several water conservation programs to help residents save water. The first is the Long Be Gone program, which provides rebates to customers of participating water agencies for replacing their lawn with water efficient landscaping. And coming up in July, City of Burlingame residents will soon be able to take advantage of that program, as we're going to be starting that for the first time. So if you live in Burlingame, stay tuned because we will be launching this program in July. And the second is a rain barrel rebate program, which provides rebates of up to $200 for the purchase and installation of rain barrels. Next, we also have a smart irrigation weather controller rebate with a partnership with a company called Ratio. And they use a smart controller which can tell when it's going to be raining in advance, so it can automatically shut down your irrigation so that it doesn't water while it's raining. And through this program, the Ratio 3 typically retails for $280. And if you live in Burlingame or any of the other water agencies that are part of this program, you can purchase these controllers for $100 plus tax. And lastly, there is also an optional rain garden rebate program where if you're already participating in the Long Be Gone program, you can get an additional $300 rebate for turning that lawn into a rain garden. And if you have any questions or would like to learn more about these programs, you can visit the website bayareaconservation.org. And if you enjoyed tonight's program and want to learn more, we invite you to some of our additional upcoming webinar classes. So here are the list of conservation classes that are coming up in the next 2 months. We are coming up towards the end of the spring workshop series. So if you don't see a class here that is interesting or that you can attend, we'll also be offering classes in the fall. And if you want additional resources to help you on your journey to convert your lawn to a water efficient garden, please visit bayareagardening.org. where you can find pictures, plant lists, and a plant selection tool to help you on your journey. And let's see. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to tonight's speaker, Juanita. There we go.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right. Let's make this bigger. There we are. Slideshow from the beginning. Well, greetings, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I am Juanita Salisbury. I teach a number of these classes for BOSCA. I have a degree in psychology. My area in psychology was biological psychology. And I'm also a California licensed landscape architect. And my area in psychology was ingestive behavior, that is eating and drinking. And so that educational background plays kind of a big role in the way I design gardens and the kind of the broad concepts that we'll talk about tonight. I do take care of a number of different habitat gardens here in Palo Alto, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden. We also have a YouTube channel, which is Primrose Way. As I mentioned, I do take care of a number of different gardens here in Palo Alto, and these gardens all feature native California plants, and there are 5. And so there's the Island Drive Garden, the Arcadia Place Garden, Hopkins Avenue, Gwynda Street Garden, and then the Primrose Way Pollinator Garden, which we are connecting along Embarcadero Road via the Embarcadero Road Pollinator Corridor Project. So the gardens are always open. If you're interested in learning more about how these plants look out in the environment, these are great places to go. Each garden is slightly different, but they all have some nice plants to take a look at, and they're looking pretty good right now. Everything is blooming and nice, so it's definitely the time to go take a look. So tonight, my approach is going to kind of paint a picture with broad concepts. I think that by giving you kind of these overarching concepts makes it easier for you to decide on things rather than kind of these tiny little picky specific suggestions. So we're going to talk a little bit about form follows function, and then getting rid of your lawn, some lawn alternatives, evergreen trees and native plants, and maintenance, and how all these different aspects can then go into how to lower the time that you spend maintaining your garden and still have a garden to look at. I noticed that there was a question up in the chat. Jennifer, that's the handout. Never mind. Okay, very good. And these slides also feature a lot of the macro photography that I do. One of the things that I like to do is to observe in the gardens. I've been doing that since 2016. And that way I know that in terms of providing habitat, they're working as I monitor the various insect and other animal species that use them. So what do we mean by form follows function? I'm sure you guys have heard this expression before. When you're trying to make a decision as a designer, or really a lot of kinds of decisions, ask yourself, what is the use of that area? How are you going to be using the area? Are you going to sit there, walk, play? Is it going to be a planted area? You know, just like, you know, really think about the function. And that, you know, is really key in terms of making a lot of decisions then for going forward in terms of like what you have in your yard. And so you ask yourself then, okay, if I'm not going to be doing the things that a lawn provides for you, do you really need one? So something to consider. If you want plants in your yard, consider again the function of those plants. Are you wanting them for shade? Do you need some kind of screening from the neighbors or not a good view or something like that? Are you looking for ground covers? Are you looking for accent plants, things like that? And when you choose plants, consider the following attributes of those plants. Are they low water using? If they're low water using, they're going to save you money on your irrigation. Are they low maintenance? And low maintenance plants, we'll talk about those. There are certain aspects of plants that make them low maintenance. Do they live a long time? You know, can you plant it and not have to replant it for 25 years or 600 years? So definitely something to think about. Does it have a nice fragrance? Do you like a specific color palette? Do you like a rougher texture? Do you like a finer texture? You know, what about the form of the plant? Do you want something that's upright or wider or rounder? So consider the attributes of the plants, and then also consider your style. Are you looking for something more formal, so a lot of symmetry and very symmetrical beds? Or are you looking for something more informal, something a little bit, maybe a little more cottage garden-like? Do you want something that's traditional, modern, contemporary? So all of these things, consider, you know, when you're looking at a low maintenance yard. Certainly some kinds of gardens, like English cottage type gardens, pretty to look at, but can be high maintenance in terms of deadheading flowers, shearing things back, cleaning up leaves, you know, just a lot of things that plants need for their grooming, their care, and feeding. So consider those attributes and consider your style. And so again, with the function, so leverage this function-based decision-making on reducing your yard maintenance and also yard costs. And so one of the big costs that we have in outdoors is the irrigation. Outdoor irrigation accounts for most of a home's water use, and lawns can account for up to 50% of that outdoor water use. So again, consider the function on deciding whether to have a lawn or not. What are they used for? Okay, you know, consider the cost saving functions to remove the lawn. Let's say you have a lawn service that comes in and once a week mows everything down, does leaf blowing, you know, blows things out of the beds, you know, for $100 a month. If you get rid of that service because you don't have a lawn anymore, that's $1,200 a year that you can spend on other goodies or retirement accounts or whatever you like. And also, if you mow, there was a study that was done in 2019 that shows that it increases the weeds and lawn pests. So, you know, again, here we have a picture of a lawn with one little girl running on it, and the rest of the people are on the patio. So lawns are good for walking on and like playing on, but are there other things that we might use that have the same function, but don't use that kind of water? The answer is yes. So let's talk about getting rid of that lawn. A great website here, this is just a screenshot of this particular website called lawntogarden.org, and it tells you how the process, I'm not going to go into the big process of removing your lawn, and they talk about sheet mulching, which is basically where you put down sheets of cardboard and top it off with mulch, and then you can plant straight into that. So this particular website goes into that if you're looking to replace your lawn and say, do a planting bed instead. And so the Stop Waste people have another great website that talks a little bit about this too. If you're looking to convert your lawn into a planted area that you're not going to be walking on, again, it shows instead of like removing the sod and killing the grass with chemicals, just put down that cardboard, which smothers the grass, holds everything in, mulch on the top, and then you can plant right through it. So instant garden effect. And this will also keep weeds down. Mulch, any kind of organic material that's nice and fluffy on top of the soil, is going to reduce your maintenance because you're not going to be weeding as much. And any weeds that do come up are going to be straggly because they have to come up through the cardboard and the mulch, and they'll be weaker and much easier to pull out. So it's just a huge way to reduce your maintenance is to mulch. And it looks really nice. So here's one of my favorite mulches. This is a mini fir bark mulch. It looks instantly good. I mean, it's like the quickest way to make something look uniform and high end. You spread it once a year and you're done. And it just gives that kind of nice finished look, holds moisture in the soil so you don't have to irrigate as much, and holds the weeds down. So mulch, super way to reduce any kind of maintenance for weeding and things like that. And you can walk on it. So it's a win. Now, if you're not wanting to create a planted area, what are some of the alternatives to lawn? So you can still have places where you can walk, people can gather. Decomposed granite, which is basically crushed granite stone, is wonderful. It can easily take the place of grass. It's not as intensive to install as, say, concrete, and it just gives you an instantly nice look, creating a nice patio area. In this particular client's house, we put some stepping stones in, so if they wanted to go barefoot, they would have these nice smooth stones to walk on. Again, took out the lawn issues, gave them this nice permeable patio area of the gravel, and they love it, and they can use it for a lot of different things, and it's almost zero maintenance. I think they have their gardeners come in and clean it up 4 times a year, and get rid of any sort of like debris that falls in there. Okay, now if you just are looking for some place to walk barefoot and you don't want a lawn, these outdoor rugs are another great alternative. If you want something soft to walk on, what better alternative than a nice outdoor rug? It doesn't have to be on a patio. It can be like where you let the lawn die. You just put a nice rug down because you still want to walk outside barefoot, have a place to like sit outside on the ground, have a picnic or whatever. At the end of the season, you roll it up before the rains come, take it inside. Pretty low maintenance alternative there. Again, what is the function here though? So you can sit on it, you can walk on it. Think about how the space is getting used. But if you really want grass, and some people just love lawns, you have options. You can have a native grass that only uses about 1/3 or maybe 1/4 as much water. And so a company that I like to use to get sod from is Delta Bluegrass, and they have these native sod blends. There are a couple of different kinds, and you can go to their website and take a look. They tell you what the species are in there. There's Agrostis palens here. There's Idaho fescue, the Festuca idahoensis, a couple of different looks. Don't have to be mowed, which is awesome because less maintenance. Some people do mow them like once a year. If you don't want to do sod, you can get the seed and throw the seed out in the wintertime and let it germinate with the winter rains. So again, super easy, low water use, lower maintenance alternative for a traditional non-native sod blend. You can do these native bunch grasses instead if you want to go with something a little bit more meadowy. So here's a few different types that are in here. This looks like that sod, the no-mow here in between there. So some different looks, certainly. Or you can go with something non-native, which I don't like, but if you like something soft in between stepping stones, you can go with the non-native thyme. This is a variety called Elfin. Stays nice and low, so you're not tripping over it because it pops up and like creates little barriers that you kind of stub your toe on. It's very soft. You can walk barefoot on it when it's not blooming. You know, something like this, when it does bloom, the bees like to kind of get in there and have a snack. Something to consider if you want to go barefoot. So lots of alternatives if you like to have things that are growing. And again, you can walk on these. Now, if you're not looking to walk across something and you want that sweep of green, there are alternatives. We have options here as well. And I'm going to talk a lot about native California plants because they're really low water use alternatives here. And one of my favorite ground cover alternatives for lawn is Ceanothus thriciflorus. This is a variety called a Yankee Point, and you get a huge swath of green, same as with the lawn. This basically gets watered maybe once every 4 or 5 weeks in the summertime for about 10 minutes. That's plenty. So you don't have to mow it. Even if leaves fall on it, you can let those decompose. So it's almost zero maintenance. And here's a designer trick for you. Instead of having small clumps of things, have a big swath of one plant like this. Cuts down maintenance because you're not dealing with a lot of little individuals, but you've got this whole like swath of green, and it just, you know, it becomes very uniform and very easy to, you know, find that weed, you know, somewhere in there. You just carefully pick your way over, pull it out, you're good to go. So designer trick, big swaths of plants of the same type. And you get that really nice uniform look rather than sort of the plant zoo look that, you know, it's great if you like specimens, but if you want sort of that really low maintenance, a big swath is the answer. Another big swath that can be planted is Achilles Mellifolium. This is otherwise known as yarrow. It's semi-evergreen, spreads by runners. You can mow it if you want, and it blooms. So super easy, doesn't require a ton of water. It provides all kinds of habitat resources. So lots of different alternatives. Here's another one, and you can walk on this somewhat. And it looks nice and lush, has that ferny look, nice fine texture, kind of a really pretty plant. Another alternative, a nice swath. Here we have our Evergreen Strawberry. So this is a fun one because you can get some tasty fruit. And it can spread by runners. It can take a little sun, it likes shade. It's just a nice looking plant. This is during the dry, hot part of summertime. Pretty low water use. Still looks good even later in the year when it gets challenging towards the end of August and September. Yet another one. This is Clinopodium Dudleyae. You see this growing out in our parks, out in the foothills a lot. It's evergreen, which means it doesn't lose its leaves all at once. Has a minty taste, so you can make a nice tea with it. It's very low, it's trailing, it can do shade easily. Again, you know, needs like nothing to, you don't really have to do anything to it after you plant it and it becomes established. Mine in my garden, I water about once every couple of weeks, maybe. But in the wild, it doesn't get watered during the summertime at all, and it does just fine. So you're probably saying, okay, Juanita, what should I plant then? And my answer is always go to your California native plants for your go-to plantings. My resource for finding plants is cowscape.org, and this is a screenshot of their landing page that they have. And I like cowscape.org because it's done by the California Native Plant Society, and this is a free resource. So it's a database that shows you all of the plants that we have that are native to California, 7,990, so lots to choose from. And from this particular database, you can then create your plant palette of trees, shrubs, perennials, bulbs, vines, and succulents. And they've broken it down for you where you've got all plants, trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, grasses, and so forth. And if you go and click on any of these, the planting guide is actually really useful in terms of like questions about irrigation and maintenance issues. They show you what nurseries you can find these. You can create your Excel spreadsheet, and you can search by location, by your city, by your county, and you can also search by name. So just a great resource to find any kind of California native plant that you might be looking for your situation: ground covers, butterfly hose, hedges, and so forth. Now, remember when I said I studied ingestive behavior and how it was relevant to what we're doing. And this is the interesting thing about plants. When we think about plants, at least I do, my question when I plant things, I often think about who am I feeding with this plant? Because plants are food. Humans eat plants, but many insect larvae eat plants, and they're very picky about what they eat. 90% of insect species, I saw this statistic the other day, are very specific about what they eat. They're the chemicals that they like in their dinners. They won't eat just anything. They like specific chemicals. And so on the Cowscape site, they have this tab, butterflies. And if you click on it, we can see that in California, we have 1,368 species of butterflies and moths that are eating these plants. Everybody knows about the monarchs and milkweed, but all these other butterflies like skippers and swallowtails and sulfur butterflies and silvery blues and California sisters and queens and all these, like the dog-faced butterfly, they all eat plants as caterpillars. And the things that we know, and this is one of these broad concepts here, is that, and I'm going to just say it, biology is very powerful. And this is a huge concept. Biology is powerful. And what we know about biology is that when we have living organisms in the environment, those things, the number of species in an environment are based on basically the number of species that are in the environment. So the more plant species that you have, the more organisms you'll have in that environment. And we know that those species of plants need insects to survive, like pollinators, like those bees, because the pollinators move the genes around. And that doesn't just happen with just the wind. Some plants are wind pollinated, but a lot of plants require pollinators to move those genes around. And we know that speciation happens more rapidly when you have pollinators. What we mean by speciation is that you get a lot of variability in plants' color and form and shape and all these things because of genetic variability. And that happens more rapidly when you have bees moving genes around for you. And so whenever I decide on plants, and here I'm like leveraging the power of biology, is I think about those butterfly and moth larvae. So I'm going to plant plants that are going to feed those insects that I want to see the butterflies as adults. Okay, so biology then becomes maybe more important than non-biological factors like climate, geology, and water for determining what to plant. So consider who is going to be in your yard eating those plants. And in San Mateo County, we have 83 species of butterflies and moths. So they're going to be very hungry creatures looking for food in your yard. So if you see your plants are getting chewed up, that's actually a good thing. But why California native plants? Okay, the power of biology is really evident here in California. California is a biodiversity hotspot, one of about 30 or 35 on the entire planet. Many of our species here in California are drought tolerant. Some of our species are found nowhere else on the planet, more than any other state in the United States. And we have 1,600 species of native bees that are moving those genes around in the environment, more than any other state in the United States. Here in the United States, we have 4,000 species across the entire United States. So having a large number of those in California is pretty special. And so we have such a large number of plant species because we have a lot of unique ecosystems here in California. We have coastal prairies, we have redwood forests, we have deserts, we have chaparral, and we also have 1,600 species of native bees moving things around. So those things combined give us an explosion of life and lots of different species. So again, you know, the immense power of biology you can leverage to reduce your maintenance. It's actually funny how that works. Okay, so plants are food. Plants are the beginning of everything. And we get energy from the sun, which comes down leaves and plants through photosynthesis, make that energy available then for larvae to eat. And here is a picture of a big fat caterpillar on a Grindelia. And this is my hand here. I'm so excited to see that caterpillar. And then those caterpillars get turned into baby birds. The mommies feed those soft, juicy caterpillars to their offspring. And then that food, that energy from the sun, gets passed up efficiently through the food chain. Now, why is it so important to see plants as food? One, because that's what they are, but because you're using these plants in your garden, and they're great plants, they're going to help you reduce maintenance because they're not going to require like a lot of fuss and care, but they will attract a variety of native pollinators and other insects. So you have to then try to avoid making your garden an ecological trap. And what that is, an ecological trap is something in the environment that makes it very attractive to organisms. And because of that attraction, then makes it easier to be killed through predation or other means. So, you know, you'll have this buffet of native plants in your yard, but then you want those organisms that find their way into your yard to complete their life cycles. Okay, and so that's really kind of the flip side to using native plants, is that they're great for low water use, low maintenance, but they also will provide energy from the sun to the rest of the food chain, something to be aware of. One of the broad concepts that I like to tell people to really reduce their maintenance is to use evergreen plants. Why is that? So many reasons here, but the main one is that you don't have a ton of leaves all at once to clean up. They stay green all year. You can prune them occasionally if branches block sight lines of something you want to see, or if they're blocking a pathway. Evergreen plants hang on to all their leaves. They'll drop a few here and there during the year, but not all at once like deciduous plants. So to reduce your maintenance, go evergreen, and you'll thank me later. And so the sequence in terms of like picking plants out, if you're wanting to convert that lawn area or convert to a lower maintenance yard, where do you start? So the sequence that I like to work from is start with your big stuff first. And this is a broad concept again. So start with your trees, plant those first, select those first, get them in the ground. and then shrubs. And your shrub layer should be about 60% of all your plants, and then focus on those evergreen shrubs. And then over time, don't feel like you have to do it all at once, especially if you don't want to do a lot of work all the time. You know, if you see things that you want to add in, then find those little niches in the garden to add those in, because what you'll be doing is creating a community of plants that take care of each other, so that you don't have to do the work that their roots are doing underground in terms of sharing nutrients and information and water and other things. To make it easier and less work, plant during late fall and winter because the ground is cool and moist, easier for the plants to establish. And I'm always looking for less work, so plant using smaller plant sizes in a 4-inch pot or 1 gallon, or even seeds. If you have as much experience as I have in planting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of plants, and you really don't like to dig holes, seeds are your friend. Next best thing is a 4-inch pot, something really small that you can dig with a hand trowel and you're not fighting with a hard soil. And then once the small things are planted, you'll be surprised at how rapidly they grow. But that first year, you might want to cover it with a bit of chicken wire to keep the squirrels from popping it out of the ground before the roots can establish, or the birds come in and fly off with it or something like that, or the rabbits eat it down. So those are kind of like some broad ideas to help reduce kind of the work level in terms of transitioning to something that's really low maintenance. So start with your trees, and the trees that you want. Again, I really do like the evergreen trees. But in terms of trees, people say, well, how do I decide on what to plant in terms of a tree? Trees can be very low maintenance. And I like to, again, plant small. Even if you want an oak tree, you can get away with planting an acorn, which is probably the easiest thing of all. But look for those keystone species that, if you imagine a stone arch where the center stone is holding everything up in that stone arch, and if you pull that out, the whole thing collapses. There are species of plants that are like that. And those keystone species provide food for dozens or hundreds of types of caterpillars, upon which countless other animals depend. And they also form relationships with other plants. So they really, if you imagine them being like the center hub of a lot of different information strands in a web, the more strands that they're connected to, caterpillar species, other plant species, the water table, it's just going to be that much easier for it to be sort of like self-maintaining. And so keystone plants are your go-tos to select plants. So the takeaway broad concept, the technique, is to include at least a few keystone plants to provide something that's going to be very resilient and easier to take care of. Trees also help save water. Trees absorb water and release it into the air, cooling and cleaning it. They form half the rain cycle. They team up with oceans and help circulate water across the land. Without trees, deserts can form. Trees help improve water quality by filtering rainwater, slowing down the impacts of heavy rain, and they reduce flooding and stabilize soil. So, here's a landscape without anything growing, kind of depressing. And then here we have the coast oak here, probably not the best option for most backyards or side yards or front yards, even because they're quite large. Here's my husband here, he's 6'3", so you can get a sense that, a big coast oak, great looking tree, but and really a great keystone species, but there are other oak species that you can use that are somewhat smaller, like a scrub oak, which gets, to be like the size of a small tree, but still provides a lot of those keystone services. Again, with the trees, because we're all trying to save water, we know that clouds form more often over forested areas than non-forested areas. So those cooling effects of the clouds and the carbon dioxide capture by trees, even in trees that lose their leaves, those cooling effects and the carbon dioxide capture more than offset the reflection of the sun during the times when those deciduous trees are bare. So planting trees is probably one of the best things that you can do for water use, for the climate, and for just low maintenance, because they'll keep things cooler and moister. People say, okay, so what are some evergreen shrubs that you recommend, Juanita? And so here's a few specifics, although I'm trying to give you broad concepts to wield as your superpower. And some of the things, and these are actually growing in my own home garden, because I like to keep the maintenance down to a bare minimum. So I have Vaccinium Ovadum, which is our native huckleberry. And these also provide a very tasty little tiny blueberry, because it is in the blueberry family, and they are super tasty. You know, these are in full sun for most of the day and then get late afternoon shade. I have coffeeberry, and this one I started from a seed. And you can see this is after the first year. It's already got some big glossy leaves on it. And I don't do anything to it. I water it maybe once every couple of weeks. It's still getting established. Prunicilicifolia, the holly leaf cherry. This thing does not want to be watered. It's been in the ground for a few years now. The Toyon, Heteromelies Obutifolia. I have not watered this since I planted it like 5 years ago. And it's about 12 feet tall now. An Arctostaphylos, a manzanita. They come in ground covers, they come as shrubs, they come as the larger tree size that take a while. You know, it's all nice and evergreen, glossy leaves, really a great plant. And then Ribes Viburnafolium. This is the Catalina Ribes. And it's just a great plant, very vigorous, grows in the shade. But none of these drop their leaves, really. They drop a couple, maybe a few times a year. Super easy to take care of, almost no maintenance. And if you want that kind of lush look in your yard, so it doesn't get that kind of dry and desiccated look late summer, early fall before the rain starts, go with those evergreen shrubs of about 75% of your yard being evergreens, and that will keep things looking green and just make things just look nice and lush during the drier parts of the year. But if you want some color, some other nice evergreen plants that I like, one of my other go-to plants for great color, Iris de Glaciena, and these are ones that we have in our various pollinator gardens and my home garden. This is a beautiful one called Canyon Snow. It's a hybrid, but still, you know, the colors, right? Look at these. We got a nice white one. This is a straight species here. This is blooming actually right now at the Primrose Garden. This is over at the Hopkins Avenue Garden, and I think this one's still blooming, but look at those colors, just gorgeous. And then Sticky Monkey Flower comes in a lot of different colors, and this is actually blooming right now with this juicy red. I mean, this looks like Christmas to me with the red and the green. Just, you know, you can get color, you know, you don't have to have everything just green, green, green all the time. You can get pops of color in there for accents. Another thing that's super low maintenance, succulents. Succulents, man, such a great way to go. The word succulent comes from the Latin word succus, meaning juice or sap. So plants that store water in their tissues, making them resistant to drought, because we're all trying to save water. And so this is one of those broad concepts, is have plants, organisms in your yard that store water in their living tissues. Again, the power of biology is that biological organisms store water in their tissues. And that's a great place to store water, is inside of organisms. And really low maintenance. So you can have like a broad swath of these succulent plants, and you really don't have to do anything to them. So just really, other than plant them. Lots of different kinds of succulents: cactus, Lewisia, agaves, sedum, crassula, leptocyanes, Dudleyas, one of my personal favorites, and even bulbs. And we have a lot of California native bulbs, which are, some of them really don't like to be watered at all during the summer. They need to be dry so they don't rot. So again, super low maintenance. And we have a lot of succulents here in California to choose from, 188 succulents native to California. You could go to town, do everything in succulents if you love succulents, lots to choose from. As I mentioned, my favorite species of succulents are the Dudleyas. And a couple of years ago, I went down to Pinnacles National Park and saw Dudleyas growing on a vertical rock surface. And I thought, well, that makes a point that these are really low maintenance, because it's actually growing on a vertical surface. No soil really at all. How is it doing it? And so I've been really getting into Dudleyas for this very reason, because they really will just live their best lives and you have to do just almost nothing to them. Again, more Dudleyas, because, you know, I just have a thing for them. And so one of my favorites in my home garden here is the Dudleya virens subspecies Hassii in March versus September. So you can see that during the rainy season, it gets all fleshy and nice and juicy, and it's still looking pretty juicy even after, you know, the hot, dry summer. Others don't have that kind of, like those finger-like leaves. They have a flatter leaf, and so they do tend to dry up at the base. But during the rainy parts of the year, they fluff out. This I keep in a pot. I basically ignore this plant, and it rewards me with a bloom spike every year. And so for that lush look, you can combine things like these sedums as a nice ground cover with a nice luscious ground cover manzanita here. Again, low water, low maintenance, pretty easy combination. I think it looks great. You have a nice big swath of things, and not fussy at all, super easy. So in terms of maintenance, so overall, native gardens are less maintenance than a non-native garden with a lawn, because you're not mowing, you're not blowing, hopefully, you're not watering all the time, you're not raking up leaves, unless you have some deciduous things and you want to clear off those patios. Basically, what you're mainly doing at the beginning is keeping weeds at bay, and that's really most of the work, is pulling weeds. You want to establish those plants, to establish them maybe once a week, and you want to irrigate just outside of that root ball to encourage those roots to search out for the water and find it. Prune sparingly to control any sort of dried up dead material for fire safety. You don't even need to fertilize these plants. They actually like a nice lean soil. I amend very sparingly if the soil is hard to work. I might work in some cactus mix for drainage purposes. At the beginning, I mulch to control weeds initially and help establish those plants. And then, because I do have deciduous trees in my yard as well, when those leaves drop, I just leave them where they are. And then about this time of year, I get a load of mulch, and then I do one bark chip thick on top of those leaves. So I have a very fluffy leaf pile, and then the bark chips on the top gives it that nice uniform look, and that holds moisture in and it holds down weeds. It's just really easy to do. And plus a lot of organisms will overwinter in leaf litter. So you don't want to be blowing those leaves away. Leaves are actually really good for the environment. I don't really even worry about leaves burying plants because leaves break down. They're organic material, and so they break down over time. And so I don't worry about it. And I don't use leaf blowers in those planted areas, again, because there are larvae that are hiding out as pupa over winter in the leaf litter. If you do use a leaf blower to clean up hardscape areas like patios, use something that's electrically powered so that you're not spewing out fumes and emissions. And you don't need pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides. So nothing to kill anything, obviously. So it's like by doing less, you actually do more for the environment. And that's the beauty of a native garden. It's actually pretty low maintenance because the less you do, the better it is. And again, about leaving the leaves, it's less work. You just want to remove those from the walkways, your patios, and driveways, and then leave them in the planting beds as mulch. 2 or 3 inches deep is plenty. The old way of doing things, people would clean up the garden a few times a year, but leaving those leaves is actually better. The leaves actually feed those fungal networks underground, and fungal networks underground, the fungus actually has a relationship with plant roots where they exchange nutrients and information, and that makes it easier for the plants to live without any sort of interventions. Leaves are free, so you're not spending money. And even if you have a lawn, even if you leave a thin layer of leaves on the lawn, not harmful. Leaves hold in moisture. Leaves are eaten by organisms. They disappear over time. They suppress weeds, as I mentioned again. And leaving those leaves allows trees to complete that natural life cycle where they return those nutrients to the soil for reuse. Irrigation. Rule of thumb, plant during the fall, winter, or spring when the soil is nice and cool. Plant small. Remember, less work is better. Water once or twice a week just outside the root zone to help those roots seek out moisture and to get established. Roots will grow in the direction of something moist. And you want to research the amount of water use for your plant, whether it's very low, medium, or high. Uses of mulches, things like boulders, shade from trees actually reduce moisture loss from the soil. And once your plants are established, water is recommended. So very low water use plants, maybe, once a month during the summertime. Some people do what they call the spritz off, where people just kind of spray off the leaves with the hose once a month during the summertime to kind of get the dust off. Some drip irrigation may be suitable for plants that grow in seep areas, so that have a water source underground. And then don't water during the hot temperatures because then you'll be making the soil warm and moist, which can encourage the growth of pathogens. And again, go back to that Cowscape, California Native Plant Gardening Guide. That has a lot more in-depth or information about watering to make it even less work. Now, I did talk about those ecological traps, and here we have a moth hanging outside of my window at night. I felt so bad about this, but now we have blackout curtains in all of our windows because moths are attracted by light. And remember, those moth larvae it's baby bird food. And so I want to help them complete their life cycle, or at least help them to provide food for baby birds. So amongst the goals for having that low maintenance garden, when you're using the native plants, is to sort of close the circuit on the native plants and to help those plants optimize reproductive success. And so in these native plant gardens with abundant blooms, with nectar and pollen and hosts for butterfly and moth larvae, these are going to be very attractive to these insects. And remember, we don't want to trap them so you invite them to dinner and then kill them, but we want them to complete their life cycle. So if you have 2 separate planting areas, maybe consider bridging them with a swath of something. You want to try to reduce light pollution at night. So blackout curtains and windows are good. Using motion sensors on outdoor lighting at night instead of leaving lights on. You can use yellow colored lights, which are less attractive to insects. You know, you can lose up to 60% of insects that are attracted to lights at night in a single night. So, you know, we're losing insects to light pollution. Leave your leaves because insects are becoming larvae and they overwinter and shelter in leaf litters, and leaf blowers around plantings kills the insects before they can become adults. You want to eliminate your use of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. Your native bees are nesting in the ground, 70% of them. And so any of these chemicals can interfere with the development of the offspring. And again, reduce as much gas-powered equipment as possible because of the fumes from those machines interfere with the life cycle of these organisms because they use fragrance to help orient around, and those fumes interfere with that behavior. So remember, sometimes doing less is better. You know, if we're trying to reduce maintenance, this is one of the easiest ways to go. So in terms of my final thoughts here, remember, we're talking broad concepts here to leverage that immense power of biology, because that can become your superpower. And among those other ecosystem services and saving money on water and maintenance, as well as time and energy, the more you'll understand these interrelationships with nature, you'll learn how to optimize the productivity of your native plant garden with less work, less maintenance than a non-native garden. And that leads to an abundance of life. And that also leads to the enhancement of your appreciation of your role in caring for nature's complex beauty. And with that final thought of these broad concepts and empowering people to leverage that immense power of biology, I'd be happy to take any questions that people might have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Juanita. All right, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. So our first question comes from a speaker who is trying to get rid of their front and back lawns. They have a double lot and they have a small budget and they like to start in the front. So they want to know what kind of investment they should expect for scattering plants and one young tree. They know that there are some mulch and chip resources, and they want to know how many nurseries they should visit before making their decisions. So that was a lot, but.
So that's awesome. And so what I like to tell people is to really plan out your yard. You know, get a piece of graph paper, and in each square of that graph paper, you know, make that equal 1 foot, you know, measure your yard, and then plan out sort of the mature sizes of plants so that as circles, so that the plants are being shown at their mature diameters, and each of those circles can slightly touch or overlap. That way you can get the spacing correct, and that way it will tell you how many of a specific plant that you want to use. What I like to tell people, you know, find that, do your research first. So you know that you want one tree in your yard, make it a good one. But look at your site. Is it a shady yard? Is it flat? Are you on a hillside? Do you have overhead power lines that you might have to deal with? What sort of underground utilities are you dealing with? So you don't want something that's going to be too close to underground utilities. And you don't want something that's going to get too tall and grow into overhead power lines. But if you have a big front yard, you can go with something a little bit bigger. You know, if you don't have all those constraints. You know, so do your research to pick out a really good native tree, and get this. A good money saver here is to get the smallest one that you can in terms of like pot size. If you can get a 1 gallon size, it might look like a skinny little stick for a couple of years. You know, there's a saying, first year it sleeps, then it creeps, the second year, and the third year it explodes into growth. And by the third year, these things will really take off. A great evergreen tree that I like to use is the Prunicilicifolia, the holly leaf cherry. That one's a great one for an evergreen tree. Another one that I really like that's evergreen is the mountain mahogany, the Cercocarpus betuloides, which is also local to this area. They grow very fast and they're very pretty. They have a nice kind of vase-shaped form to them. So really, you know, consider each plant at a time. You know, plan out those planting beds. Really think about where that tree is going to go. And then, you know, same with the shrubs. And, you know, what shrubs do you go with next? What I always tell people, these are kind of starter plants, is, you know, try to pick out maybe something like an Arctostaphylos, the manzanitas. Find one that, you know, would probably work well for your area, and really work on those kind of backbone shrubs and your one tree first, and, you know, get those in the ground. We have a little bit of time left. We have a planting window of time before it gets really hot and unpleasant, and the ground gets really hard and hot, and it's just not great. The plants really struggle during the summer if you plant during that time. You know, and you can be very budget minded about that by getting the smaller plants, and the 1 gallon or even smaller sizes are just, they're cheaper. You know, you can get like a 1 gallon plant for, depending on the species, for, you know, $15. And then you can get mulch from your city, some like Palo Alto, at some of the garden sites, the community garden sites around will provide free of charge mulch that you can get. Our city even provides compost free of charge, which is great. So those things can be done really on a budget. If you have a lot of cardboard saved up from those Amazon deliveries or whatever, you know, flatten those out, you know, plop them right down on top of that lawn, you know, where you have planned for doing the planting, and then get that free mulch. You know, it might take a few trips. So, you know, if you do it yourself, it's cheaper, but the trade-off is you're also doing the work. And so you want to minimize the work that you're doing as much as possible, because gardening is hard work. You know, that's why sometimes a landscape contractor can be pretty expensive, because it's a lot of work to dig holes and prepare sites and things like that. You know, even if you were just to put down cardboard first and then put mulch on the top of it and plant one tree, that's a good start for this year, because by the winter time, you can be ready to plant, and the lawn will be dead underneath. The cardboard will have broken down, be pretty easy to push the mulch back and dig straight down into the soil. And if you even wanted to be cheaper about it, you could get cuttings of things like an Arctostaphylos from friends who maybe have a plant that you like, and you can start those in little 4-inch pots and grow those out and have them ready to go for next winter. So, really, you can be very budget minded about it. Just depends on how much work you're willing to do. So those are my recommendations, to be as budget friendly as possible if you're doing it yourself.
Thank you. Yeah. And also I put a link in the chat of another great resource. It's the Cowscape Garden Planner. And so if you click on the link, there's 4 questions that you need to answer, and then it will actually come up with a customized plant list and also a design idea for you that shows, I mean, it's not really construction ready, but it has like a layout of like where you can put all these plants, shows the diameters of the plants when they're fully grown, what Juanita was saying. And so I encourage you to check that out as well. All right, so we did get a couple questions in the chat, so I just want to remind everyone to try to use the Q&A if you can, but I'll just go through the chat ones since they came a little earlier. So one question is, does one need to get rid of an old sprinkler system for the lawn? And I assume this is, if they want to convert the lawn to a native garden.
No. So when we did the Primrose Garden, that was our first garden. It was nothing but lawn and a 4 or 5 cherry trees. And so we left that in place, and we use that to irrigate our gardens now. And those, while during the active growing season, the irrigation comes on once a week for about 10 minutes, which is about 1/4 as much as it was getting when it had a lawn there. So you don't have to take out your old irrigation. You could just leave it. I would just leave it if it works with your design.
Sounds good. And another question. So does it make sense to take out small parts of a lawn at a time versus removing the entire lawn? Any thoughts?
Yes. So that's actually a really good question, because it can be overwhelming to do a big project. And I kind of like to call what I do sometimes in my own yard, because I'm slowly transitioning things here. And I don't like to do things all at once, because, that hedge of whatever it was there for 30 years. And if there's like a little ecosystem that exists there. So I'm like, I do it in the slow gardening kind of way, where I do small areas at a time. It's easier to just, in your overall scheme of things, to do things in small patches, because that way the organisms that live in the environment have some time to adjust to the changes that you're incorporating. And to do things slowly like that gives you a chance to really observe, to see, what is the ecosystem that's existing there already. It's not a clean slate that you're dealing with. So you have to kind of like, are there salamanders living under there? Because, you just never know. Are there native bees nesting there? So doing smaller sections, I recommend, especially if you don't want to feel overwhelmed all at once. And then you can have like, okay, first year plan, second year plan, third year plan, and so forth. And that's a great way to go, so you don't get overwhelmed and kind of stop working on it, because it's like, it's too much. It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, and then speaking of overwhelming, so one person had noted that, all of the things that you mentioned tonight seems a little complex. So they're wondering, is this a DIY project, or can they just hire someone to draw out the plans for, the landscaping, and then hire a contractor? What are your recommendations on where to start on, for lawns front and back of the home?
So the California Native Plant Society has some gardening resources in which they list those people who do native plant garden design. as well as native plant installation. So there are landscape contractors who specialize in those sorts of things. And there are landscape designers as well as landscape architects that my battery is running low. How is that possible? That can, hang on a sec, that can help you with that, certainly. All right, let's see. So I'm gonna say stop share for a second. All right, very good. Okay. My my computer wasn't plugged in. It's like, oh, it's gonna die on me. So that's the answer. You know, certainly because gardening is hard work, you know, you can get people who are experts to do it for you. It can be complicated. That's why I tell people to try to start small, if possible, because it can be overwhelming, and these kind of large, broad concepts, you know, it takes a while for people to sort of incorporate those and make those, you know, kind of their outlook and their kind of their perspective on these gardens. You know, but again, you know, if you wanted to try it yourself, I really encourage people to do that, because it's very empowering to take that initiative and feel like, you know, this is something I can do to, you know, make things better instantly. You know, even if it's just planting one tree, you know, that's a great place to start. But, you know, I understand for people, it's just like, I can't wrap my head around it. You know, sometimes it's better to hire a professional who does this kind of design, as well as this kind of installation. So a couple of different ways to go. I'm always encouraging people to try this at home themselves, but it's also easier. Oh, thank you, Jennifer, for popping that up there. That's perfect. To have people come in. I actually do use a service myself to help me with my garden. Mostly it's like cutting down the ivy and removing plants that are just too big for me personally to remove. I sadly had to remove my lemon tree, which was not giving me any lemons, and it was all yellow no matter what I would do. So I popped that sucker out with the help of the gardening service. That they specialize in native plants, and so they're very good and very careful in my own particular garden. So you can have people come in and help you with just the things that you can't do yourself, because let's face it, yes, removing a tree is not easy, and I don't really have the right kind of equipment myself to do that sort of work. So, you know, just try to go for those things where there's like the best bang for your buck in terms of like the things that are high priority.
Yeah, and if you, so if you haven't seen the chat, so I put a couple of links. If you are the type of person that just wants to find someone to hire and, you know, you're not really a DIYer, which is totally fine. I put a couple of links in the chat where you can look for different landscape installers, people who do maintenance. So feel free to check that out, and hopefully, you know, find someone that, you know, can execute your vision of a new water efficient garden. All right. And so the next question we have, if you're looking to do a succulent garden, is it still good to mulch, apply mulch to avoid the weeds?
You can start off with the mulch. The thing with most succulents is that they're going to want good drainage. And actually, some people use like a decomposed granite mulch around them instead of an organic mulch. You know, and that's a kind of a different aesthetic. But I think to start off, it's fine to do it. You just want to be sure that there's good drainage around your succulents.
Great. So that's all the questions we have. I'll give it maybe a couple more minutes if anyone else has any burning questions. But in the meantime, I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who registered for this presentation and let you know when the recording has been uploaded on Bosca's YouTube page. And I'll also include the links that I popped into chat in that follow-up email. So if you forget to click on it, then no worries, I'll put them in the follow-up email as well, so you can have that. And I don't see any more questions, so I think we could probably call it a night. All right. Yeah. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Hopefully you learned a thing or two. And hopefully this left you inspired to take out your lawn, and maybe not all of it at once, but maybe parts of it, so that it's not too intimidating. And yeah, any final words, Juanita?
You know, once you get going with the native plants, I just have to tell people you might become obsessed with them. And that's not a bad thing. So, but really, you know, the difference between the native plant gardens and the non-native gardens, it's so much like night and day, because there's so much life in the gardens when you have these plants, because they are so attractive to all kinds of wildlife. And, you know, I would say, you know, just try it, you know, be empowered to do it. And, you know, be fearless. And, you know, these plants have been in the California area for millennia. And, you know, nature, you know, is very happy when we plant more of her children. And so, you know, I think people will surprise themselves at just how different these gardens are in terms of like the kind of the general vibe of them and everything. But my goal here is to empower people to just go for it, and you know, just be amazed at what happens when you do. Because as a landscape architect, you know, back in the day, they taught us how to shrub it up. And they didn't really talk about the functional aspects of plants. They talked about plants as screens and plants as, you know, whether they were pyramidal shapes or upright or like rounded. And so they didn't really talk about what plants actually do, which is provide food. And that would have changed everything. And so when I discovered, you know, kind of like this paradigm shift into the big design world and the biology and the plant world, you know, understanding then the function really gave me another tool in my toolbox to make the right decisions about what to plant. Because it wasn't then again about like, there are lots of plants that will provide a screen for you, but they're not all equal in terms of what they really do. And so going with the California native plants, just like it makes the playing field level, because you know that they are going to be doing what they're supposed to do. You know, whether they're screen plants or other plants, they are actually providing energy from the sun and transferring it up into the food chain, which is what plants are actually supposed to do, rather than just, you know, shrubbing it up, right? So native plants are just another tool in the gardener's toolbox.
Great. Well, with that, hope everyone has the good rest of their evening. And yeah, maybe we'll see you again in another workshop. Take care, everyone.
Take care.